What is going on, everyone? James Hancock here. I got into an advanced screening today of Guy Ritchie's new movie, The Gentleman, and I'm very excited to discuss it. The movie came out already in the UK a couple weeks ago, but it won't be getting its official release in the US until Friday, January 24th, so I'll be keeping this review spoiler-free. But what I will say is that I thoroughly enjoyed it and think it's Ritchie's strongest movie since Snatch back in 2000, a movie that I've seen many times over. When I saw the trailer a while back, I thought the movie looked relatively entertaining, but the trailer, in my opinion, doesn't begin to do justice to just how solid this movie is. Now, when it comes to Guy Ritchie's filmography, admittedly, I have skipped one or two of his movies over the years, like the recent live-action Aladdin, which obviously was great for his career in terms of proving he can deliver a billion-dollar hit for big studios. But something tells me that Guy Ritchie would not fault me for taking a pass in that I skip all of Disney's live-action remakes of their classic cartoons. But The Gentleman feels very personal in many ways. Guy Ritchie shares story credit with two other writers on this movie, but he has the sole screenwriting credit, and it almost feels like he very deliberately wanted to remind people just how good he can be when making movies about slick, charismatic gangsters going to war with one another. But it's been a while since he gave us one of these kinds of movies. I enjoyed his two Sherlock Holmes flicks. I enjoyed The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I thought King Arthur Legend of the Sword had some decent scenes, but ultimately was kind of a misfire. And while Aladdin was easily the biggest commercial hit of his career, I imagine 99 out of 100 people who saw it have no idea who Guy Ritchie is. And for a filmmaker who came roaring out of the gate in the late 90s with such a specific filmmaking style and brand name recognition, that's got to be frustrating. The flip side is that people who like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch, and Rock'n'Rolla absolutely know who Guy Ritchie is. These are his real fans, and I suspect most of them, after seeing The Gentleman, they're going to be exchanging high fives and quoting the movie's colorful slang as they enjoy a drink in one another's company. This is one of those movies that will absolutely make you want to pop open a few bottles of single malt scotch. If that sounds like you, then definitely see the movie. And speaking of single malt, I've got a little bit of Balvenie left from the holidays, and I'm going to pour a little Balvenie for the remainder of this video because I feel like for The Gentleman, it is wildly appropriate. And no, this video is not sponsored by Balvenie. I'm just doing this for free because I think the scotch is delicious. Hell yeah. So if you take a quick glance at Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, you'll see that some of Ritchie's haters out there are already attacking the movie for a wide variety of silly reasons. But the one major critique that actually resembles legitimate film criticism is the argument that perhaps The Gentleman is a retread creatively, essentially that Guy Ritchie's fleeing back to safe terrain in order to rebuild his reputation after Aladdin. But my response is, so what? Apart from filmmaker Matthew Vaughn, Ritchie's old producing partner, almost no filmmakers out there today are making any efforts to keep the British gangster genre alive. Movies like the original Get Carter from 1971 and The Long Good Friday, they're some of the coolest movies ever to come out of the UK. And as long as Guy Ritchie's injecting his stories with as many memorable characters and hysterical scenes as we have in The Gentleman, he can keep making these movies for the rest of his career, and I would never complain. So, the story in broad strokes is all about an American weed dealer named Mickey Pearson, played by Matthew McConaughey, who's beginning to grow tired of running his criminal empire and he wishes to sell. Some of his rivals interpret this desire as a sign of weakness, and all hell breaks loose as prospective buyers and sleazy journalists begin to circle Mickey Pearson and his allies, trying either to capture or destroy what he's built. On the surface, this might sound like rather conventional stuff, but the strength of the screenplay is how it incorporates an incredibly elaborate framing device with an unreliable narrator, Fletcher, a crooked journalist played by Hugh Grant. As you see in the trailer, Fletcher's trying to blackmail Pearson's empire, and much of the movie consists of Fletcher sitting down with Pearson's number two, Ray, played by Charlie Hunnam, and telling the story as he sees it so far. But because he doesn't have all the pieces yet and he's trying to turn the story into a movie script, he frequently embellishes the story or just makes things up entirely, meaning that the movie is constantly rewinding and correcting itself as Ray fills in the gaps. For fans of complex story structure and stories told out of sequence, the way this movie unfolds is an absolute joy to watch. And like with Snatch, it's a good idea to pay very careful attention because seemingly random characters and little scraps of dialogue, they plant these seeds that end up paying huge dividends toward the end of the movie with some genuinely delightful twists as the movie races toward its conclusion. Now, I won't argue that the movie soars from start to finish. From time to time, the movie sags a tad and loses the breakneck forward momentum. But the main reason you should hunt down this movie is because of a handful of performances that, from my perspective, do the majority of the heavy lifting to keep things interesting. Colin Farrell is absolutely on fire as Coach, a man who does his best to turn poor kids into what he calls good lads by training them in mixed martial arts at his gym. Like most lads, they're very good at getting into trouble, but Coach has a strong sense of honor and doing the right thing, and with the help of his lads, he does his part to make things right when they accidentally get in trouble up to their ears. Now, the only sport that I follow is MMA. I'm obsessed. And for people who don't know, director Guy Ritchie, he trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and loves the UFC. So it was a special pleasure for me to see Guy Ritchie inject so much passion for this sport into the heart of the film, The Gentleman. Also, a strong case can be made for Colin Farrell as the funniest character in the movie. All right, one more drink break. Ooh, that's good stuff, but my breath is like dragon fire right now. So a strong second place for me is Hugh Grant as Fletcher. This character he plays is an incredibly refreshing change of pace for Grant, who seems to be having an absolute blast playing a total scumbag reporter who's completely in over his head with some very dangerous, violent people. His one redeeming quality is that he's a total movie freak, and he delights in making references to old movies like Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation as he adds cinematic flourishes to every twist when he introduces new ingredients to his version of the official story of the movie. Michelle Dockery, who folks will recognize from Downton Abbey, completely switches gears as Rosalind Pearson, Mickey's Cockney wife, to whom he's absolutely devoted. She's sexy beyond words, lethal as hell, and completely holds her own in this very dangerous world in which she and her husband operate. Jeremy Strong's a welcome addition to the crew, playing against type, showing range I didn't know he had. But the real breakout performance for me was Henry Golding as Dry Eye. Some actors just seem to lean into gangster characters better than others, and he just knocks his role out of the park, so much so that he kind of makes Matthew McConaughey and Charlie Hunnam seem a little stiff and rigid by comparison. Later this year, Henry Golding's going to be playing my favorite G.I. Joe character, Snake Eyes, so chalk me up as officially a fan. In any case, when it comes to great ensemble cast, The Gentleman 100% delivers. All right, one final drink break. I'm such a lightweight. I'm already feeling my buzz, and it's just one glass of scotch. But as I mentioned before, this movie is not going to win over anyone who disliked Ritchie's work in the past. There are so many critics out there who seem completely incapable of having a laugh and enjoying themselves. They spend so much of their time wagging their fingers in disapproval at things that I love and find hysterical. So honestly, I couldn't care less if they're offended by scenes where characters are debating whether or not the use of the word cunt was meant with love or hate in a particular conversation. Because The Gentleman's one of those movies that doesn't aspire to be anything more than slick, enjoyable genre entertainment. The characters look good, they dress well, they have excellent taste in booze, and every once in a while, they blow each other's brains out or drop each other out of windows. And I went into this movie with very little sleep. I was totally exhausted, but within minutes, I knew I was in very good hands. The music choices seemed really fresh and original, but most important of all, the story just felt so tight that any fears I had of this being a Snatch Light or Diet Snatch were totally obliterated. Now, I'm not arguing that this movie's as good as Snatch. I think Snatch has aged very well. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if a lot of Guy Ritchie's old school fans stopped bemoaning the direction of his career after they see this movie. Personally, I can't wait to see it again and drag a few new people along with me. So I think that's all I got for now, but if at any point you've ever liked Guy Ritchie's gangster movies, definitely put The Gentleman on your calendar. Like I said, it opens up next Friday. Well worth your time and attention. I'm not saying it's going to be a designated like top 5 or top 10 movie of 2020, but it's the first movie I've seen this year that I really enjoyed, so who knows, maybe moving forward, Guy Ritchie will fall into this pattern where he'll do one big movie for the studios followed by one movie for himself. I mean, that's a very reliable, tried and true method that a lot of directors have nurtured these incredible careers where you go do your live action Aladdin, you make your $1 billion, you make everybody happy, and then you go off and make your personal film, and I feel like you kind of get the best of both worlds under those circumstances. So as someone who's been occasionally bewildered by Guy Ritchie's choices when it comes to stories, I would say his stock is very much on the rise, in my opinion. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up because the whiskey's actually starting to kind of kick me in the brain, and I can tell I'm going to start getting a little tongue-tied. So if you want to talk more about British gangster movies or whatever, you can always find me on Twitter at Colbrax. But if you enjoyed this review, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or even sharing it. That's very helpful to me. But can't thank you enough for watching it. I really appreciate it. Hope everyone has a great weekend. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.